What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you my full review on the new LG K51. Now, right off the bat, let me just say that this phone has quickly become one of my favorite budget devices for 2020. LG, I think, really stepped it up this year in offering a solid device in the very overcrowded budget space. It's certainly a phone that stands out. What LG ended up with here really is a decent device that can be purchased for a great price from the right retailer. But with that being said, not all K51s are created equally. And depending on when and where you buy this phone from, you might end up with an awesome deal or be paying way more than you should for this phone. There's a lot I want to go over, so I won't waste any more time. Let's just jump right into it, and I'll give you all of my thoughts on this device. First off, let's talk price. And to be quite honest, this is basically the deciding factor in determining whether or not this phone is a great deal or a terrible deal. I purchased my K51 from Boost Mobile, and the past few weeks, they've been running a promotion where you're able to buy this phone for about $90. The regular retail price is something like $150, but since this phone was launched, I have not seen it sold for that price from Boost Mobile. At $90 for just the device itself, obviously not including the service contract, the LG K51 is a fantastic deal, and I'd even go as far as to argue that it's probably the best phone you can buy in 2020 under $100. The problem is, Boost Mobile is really the only place that's selling this phone that cheap right now. Even at its full retail price at $150, it's still an okay deal, but other places like T-Mobile are trying to sell this phone for $190. And that's just way too much money. Yeah, you can switch over to Metro if you're a brand new customer and snag the phone for free using their rebate deal, but for existing customers of Metro, you absolutely should not buy this phone for that full $190 price tag. It's simply just not worth it. But new or even existing Boost Mobile customers who can get this phone for $90, that's absolutely what you should do. And for the purposes of this video, that's the price point I'm going to go off of, since that's what I was able to get this phone for, and that's about what you should pay for this phone too. And if you guys are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe want to pick up this device for yourself, I'll leave some links down below in the video description to where you can get this phone at its cheapest current prices. So be sure to check down there so you don't miss out on any good deals. Physically, the K51 I think is a really good looking phone, mainly because LG kept things simple, and they also mimicked the design language from their most premium flagship devices. Really, the K51 looks most like LG's V60, which is like a $900 phone. Most people who see this thing wouldn't have any idea that you paid $100 for it. The only difference is in the actual materials. Rather than in glass and metal, it's an all plastic build, but it's a premium, high quality plastic build, if that makes sense. There's no cheap elements here at all. It's a heavy, sturdy phone that feels dense, and the polished mirror-like rear housing and chrome frame are the perfect finishing touches. The K51 is also a big phone, and for the price, I don't think you can find anything larger. The 6.5-inch display is something I think a lot of people will enjoy. The only problem really is that it's framed in a housing that adds some unnecessary bulk. LG just isn't a company that pushes the limits with screen-to-body ratio or attempts to minimize the bezel size, and the K51 is a prime example of that. 3 out of the 4 sides of this phone are fine, even the sort of V-shaped teardrop notch I can live with up at the top. But this big bottom chin here is probably the one design element I wish didn't exist. It's nearly 1/4 of an inch of added bulk that could have been used for some more screen, or even better, could have been eliminated completely to make this phone feel a little smaller. Still, it's a minor complaint in an otherwise fairly attractive sub $100 device. And at the end of the day, for folks who like big phones with big screens, this is the best bang for your buck device that's out there right now. One-handed use is possible, though maybe not comfortable for everyone. But the bottom line is that you're really either in it for the big screen or you're not, and I think the big screen is one of the selling points for this phone. Now, the display itself, as far as the specs and quality, aren't exactly anything too special. The 6.5-inch screen is just a 1560 by 720 IPS LCD panel that packs in around 264 pixels per inch. And I think if you're coming from a 1080p display, but especially an AMOLED screen, you're going to notice some drop-off in quality. But actually, even being a little lower quality, the viewing experience is still pretty good. The screen gets plenty bright, and this may sound weird, but it's a particularly sharp-looking 720p panel. I think pixel peepers will have a hard time criticizing what you get. I certainly didn't find too much to complain about as far as the resolution is concerned, even at this large of a size. The two big things really that you might miss out on most are color. It's not as vibrant as I personally like, and viewing angles. With LCD, as you tilt the screen off axis, you get a bit of a fall off. The screen goes a tiny bit dark when it's not perfectly positioned. But I think I'm getting a little too picky. For consuming content, watching YouTube videos, browsing the web, stuff like that, the K51 does offer a good viewing experience on a big screen that I think most people will like. And like I've said a million times already, I consider this to be a $90 device anyway, so at that price, you really can't go wrong. I think one thing that might be a bit underappreciated, but should definitely be highlighted, is the out loud listening experience. The K51 offers dual stereo speakers with one speaker down below and a second speaker in the earpiece. This speaker setup is something some $500 phones don't even offer right now, so this is great to see, and it's something I personally really value. Here's a sample so you can get an idea. I applaud LG throwing in this nice of a speaker setup on this phone, and I think it's one more thing that makes the device stand out. Now, with a positive, I'll need to even things out with a negative. When it comes to unlocking the phone, the K51 has a rear-mounted fingerprint sensor, which by itself is totally fine. It might be placed a little too high since this phone is so big, but besides that, it's fast, it's accurate. If it fails the first time, it retries after like a fraction of a second over and over again until it gets you unlocked. It works perfectly fine, but it's the only biometric unlocking option. LG, for some reason, has removed Face Unlock from all of their recent phones, which I don't really understand. A lot of people want to argue that it's insecure, which is kind of true, that it's a privacy issue, which again is kind of true, that it's not as fast, it's not as accurate, not as useful, whatever the case may be. But I always found it a convenient additional unlocking method that oftentimes got me into the phone faster, depending on how I picked up the device. I can see the argument against Face Unlock, but if you had it to begin with on previous phones, why bother taking it away after the fact? It's certainly something I miss. So if I had to pick one aspect of this phone that really gives away the fact that it's a budget device, it would be the internal specs. Now, first off, the 4000 milliamp battery inside for me has been solid. Even with a larger display, because the screen is a bit lower quality and because the internals of the device are less powerful, the battery has no issues in pushing this phone through more than a day's use, which is good, so I don't really have any complaints there. But inside, the K51 is powered by a MediaTek Helio P25 processor, just 3 GB of RAM and 32 GB of built-in storage, with the option to expand that via an SD card. Though I want to talk about that built-in storage first, 32 GB I don't think is enough on its own, but mainly when you consider the fact that you can't move apps to the SD card, so that's an even bigger bummer. For regular everyday apps, even pictures and videos, you can get away with 32 GB and with moving some stuff to the SD card when it's allowed. But really, after 4 or 5 games, for example, that get installed on the phone, you're pretty much maxed out. And when it comes to those specs, the processor and RAM, I think even for a $90 phone, there's some room for improvement. You might notice that my K51 is actually even running Android 9, and that's because for whatever reason, this phone on Boost Mobile just hasn't gotten the Android 10 update yet, while the Metro version has, so that's a little weird. I can live with that though for now. Looking past that, I actually do think even given the less than ideal specs, the K51 does run fairly smooth. Here are the Geekbench 5 and Antutu benchmark scores, so you can get an idea of of what we're working with. Obviously not that great, but honestly, for easy stuff like web browsing, social media, texting, calling, emails, stuff like that, I never really had any issues. I just had to keep my expectations realistic, and if there was ever an extra second or two of load times, I just needed to remember that I only paid $90 for this thing. If you keep things simple, there shouldn't really be any issues, and fortunately LG does make it very easy to be able to optimize the phone if it starts to feel a bit slow with this home screen widget you can add. Tapping this will free up some space immediately, it'll delete some junk, and I ran this every couple of days just to keep the phone feeling fresh and running things the best it could. Now, if you do want to take things a bit further and play some games on this thing, it is possible. Once you get past the initial wait times to just launch the game, apps like Asphalt 9 and even Call of Duty Mobile can run pretty well on the K51, which did surprise me. The big thing here really is just that this is a phone that sort of needs to be actively managed. You can't really have 20 or 30 apps open and running because 3 GB of RAM just isn't enough to keep up. You can't really push it too hard because the P22 processor just isn't a chipset that can handle too much, and you aren't going to be downloading a huge library of apps and games simply because there isn't enough space on the phone to do so. But if you're looking for an inexpensive and easy to use phone that gets the simple things done right, the K51 is the device for you. And if every once in a while you want to play a game or do a little more, you can at least know the phone should handle it. Again, it's just a $90 device, and this is why I said earlier that that's really all you should pay for it. For $150 or $190 like Metro is trying to charge, these specs are absolutely terrible, but for $90, the whole package isn't really too bad. Finally, let's talk cameras. And to be honest, I think this is one more area where the K51 exceeds expectations, at least in certain situations. The rear camera setup on this phone includes a 13 megapixel main lens, 5 megapixel ultra wide, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. The front camera is also a 13 megapixel shooter, and just to get the selfies out of the way, the K51 does a decent job here actually. Maybe a little dull in color, but detail is pretty good. Skin tones are very accurate. Portrait mode definitely misses the mark for sure, but it's not terrible. I've seen way worse from a lot of other phones, even at $150 or $200 price points. So I think LG delivers a decent selfie camera, all things considered. Around back, the camera features here are pretty limited, just given the fact that the phone is a budget device, of course. All the basic stuff is here: 1080p video, portrait mode, LG's AI cam, and a couple other LG specific things, but nothing more beyond that. Now, I think the K51 can take a pretty good shot given the right lighting conditions. You get a really balanced result with accurate real-world colors, nothing too overdone, nothing oversaturated. The wide-angle camera, like 50% of the time, just kind of gets a little weird. It's this foggy, out of focus result for some reason, but when it actually gets the shot right, it looks pretty good. And unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure what the issue is when it does fail, but I suspect it has to do mainly with poor lighting conditions. And that's sort of the theme. The dimmer the setting, the worse picture you get with this phone. There's no night mode at all and no real assistance with exposure, so nighttime shots aren't great, and even some dim indoor shots miss the mark from time to time. Probably the thing that surprised me the most actually was video capabilities. You get some focus hunting if the scene is super busy, which you can tell, but oftentimes the K51 delivers a steady, good-looking video, especially outside. And this is a phone that is surprisingly smooth when panning or just moving around in general. Again, it's a $90 device, so you can't really expect a whole lot, but you've got enough to work with, and some potential at least, with every once in a while being surprised with a better than expected result. So here are my final thoughts. Like I said already, for $90, I don't know of any other phone out there that gives you the kind of value the K51 offers. With a big screen, excellent design and build quality, stereo sound, and decent cameras, there's a lot to like. Yeah, it's underpowered, but what are you really going to try and push this phone to do for $90? If you want performance, you need to double your budget and you'll have infinitely more options. But if $100 is all you want to spend on a phone, this is the device to get. If you're reasonable with your expectations, I don't think you'll be disappointed with the K51. And if you pay any more than $100 for this phone from anywhere else, you got a bad deal. there are plenty of better options out there for $150 or $190. So there you go, that's everything you need to know about the LG K51. What do you guys think? Is this a phone worth $90? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd really love to know your thoughts on this phone. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.